the US to hear from Joy Tan, and I'm very pleased to be able to welcome Joy. Joy has since moved on to bigger and greater things, but she was very instrumental at the very beginning of this project in getting BSI's internal support to promote it to the ISO community. And when we were going through the very initial stages of the work item proposal, she was the standards development manager for it. But she is an experienced program and project manager in delivering the UK's digital transformation through standards and policy. And she now has elevated to heights in BSI, where she's responsible for quantum technology, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, privacy, data, and Internet of Things. And I can't imagine a broader remit than that. So Joy Tan from BSI, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, good evening. I'm well aware I stand between everyone's breakfast, dinner, or just simply bedtime. I'm Joy Tan, the Senior Standards Manager at BSI, and I head up the Digital Standards Committee. So I can't do all of what Tony just mentioned without a solid team of 9 people behind me. And it's my great pleasure today to share more about our standardization program. But first and foremost, I'd like to thank the amazing organizing team at ACCS and our sponsors for this week's event, in fact. So we've heard so much today about the myriad of standards and conformance work that goes on with ISO IEC 27566, supporting projects and how accreditation can help secure trust in age assurance systems. And if you wish to participate in the standards development world, please do so through your respective home country's national standards body. And on this note, I will begin my presentation with a quick introduction first to BSI before I share more about the Digital Standardization Programme. So for those who may not be aware, BSI is recognized as the UK's national standards body by the UK government. We started work as early as 1901, so that we're almost more than a century old. Yeah, and this status is formally codified in the Memorandum of Understanding, where we were appointed by the UK government to develop British standards and represent UK interests in standards development at the European and international level. So on my diagram there, you can see on the left-hand side, those are the international forums that we participate in. We represent the UK in the International Organization for Standardization, that's ISO, IEC for the Electrotechnical Commission, and for ITUT, which is the International Telecommunications Union, we support DSIT, so that's our Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. We support them with technical inputs to the discussions that happen at ITUT, because membership at that level is restricted to national governments and their wider industry. So on the flip side, the right-hand side, you see the European forums that we participate in. So we have we represent the UK at the CEN-CENELEC platforms. We are also a member of the European Telecommunications Standards Institute, ETSI, which specializes in ICT-enabled systems, applications, and services. But its membership extends to manufacturers, network operators, service providers, and research bodies. So aside from, interestingly, being the world's first national standards body, NSB, BSI is also a private non-profit distributing company incorporated by the British Royal Charter in 1929. We do offer global services linked to the wider fields of like standardization, like system assessment. We provide system assessment, product certification, and training and advisory service. However, in our specific role as an NSB, we play the convener role to represent UK economic and social interests across all European and international standards organizations. And we facilitate the development of business information solutions for organizations of all sizes and sectors. And our role really is to facilitate innovation, support economic growth, and support quality and safety of products and services by enabling the creation of standards and encouraging its uptake. We publish about 3,100 standards annually. underpinned by a collaborative approach of engaging with industry experts, government, trade bodies, and SMEs and MNCs, you name it, and consumers, of course, not forgetting them, to develop standards that are fit for the industry and reflecting leading best practices. Um, this diagram here is like a pyramid, but you may be aware this is the range of standards in the industry. Um, if you participate with your NSB, we are mainly responsible for working with industry players to develop the sections in the layers in black. So we are responsible for developing national standards, regional and international. And of course, we've also have a series of flexible iterative products, which is through sponsored standards like the BSI PAS and the iterative BSI Flex. And in our role as a convener and the UK's NSB is also really crucial for us to maintain relationships with our counterpart NSBs and key stakeholders in markets of strategic interest to encourage the adoption and implementation of standards in the UK, thereby facilitating market access. And as I've mentioned earlier, the fast track sponsored standards are really meant to provide an alternative to standards developers and to accelerate innovation, reduce time to market, and address urgent industry needs. So you can come to us with PAS or Flex requests if you think that there's a project that needs a bit more urgency and a quicker development time compared to the traditional standards development approach. Now, in order to maintain a robust and coherent standards infrastructure, we have to avoid duplication on standards which could be potentially conflicting between the international and European levels. And this sort of needed technical cooperation is ratified through the Vienna Agreement between CEN and ISO, which recognizes the primacy of international standards. And likewise, between CENELEC and IEC, this is ratified through the Frankfurt Agreement that similarly strives for harmonization. And without exception, BSI follows this principle of international first by nationally adopting all European and ISO IEC standards as British standards while withdrawing conflicting standards. This ensures that the work we do also meets the WTO principles of full stakeholder engagement, open public consultation, and consensus building while working alongside other industry codes and guidance. So this stakeholder mapping diagram here gives you a visual representation of the diverse parties we engage in our consensus-based approach. And the slide here gives you a snapshot of the resources and range of work items we manage and deliver. We work with a community of 13,000 experts, striving to create positive change through the development of purpose-driven standards and services. And also we work closely with our CPIN, so our Consumer and Public Interest Network members, to give a voice to consumers and provide best practices to solve collective issues. And the reason we invest heavily into standards development is because standards supports innovation by helping organizations and players in a tech ecosystem rally around overarching issues to create a neutral playing field by ensuring standards embrace transparency, openness, effectiveness, relevance, and coherence. In the broadest sense, standards are like a common and repeated use of rules, conditions, guidelines, characteristics for products and related processes, practices, and production methods. And deploying it helps organizations to manage risks, also instill more safety, security, privacy, and quality in the development of new innovations. And this brings me to my next slide, where we will contextualize the vital role of standards in the digital economy. So the economy of the last 20 years has mostly been driven by mobile social platforms and the cloud. And the next wave of transformation that we're seeing will be driven by smart economic networks based on AI, open data, and shared ledgers. And we need to embrace this new wave of efficiency and effectiveness and while also reducing costs. But what this means is that we need to work towards building simpler, smoother, more secure systems for customers and businesses that will make our lives easier and safer. So I've distilled four key enablers that my team is progressively working towards to address in our standardization program. Firstly, with the rapid pace of technological advancement, we have to continually step up the rigor of our cybersecurity controls, the standards that supports those. And we've also been observing software as a service has skyrocketed with expanding digital supply chains, increased corporate presence on social media, and custom application development and internet-based customer interactions have also, in a sense, expanded organizational attack surface. So we're more prone to cyber attack. And also with the boom of generative AI and exponential computing powers, we have to start to lay the foundations for ethical, safe, and secure disruptive technologies. And we're doing that through our core standardization program. Secondly, as we can see, increasingly data is becoming the lifeblood of our economy, and we need to connect to prosper. So data-driven decisions for efficiency and also to manage carbon and environmental footprint will become vital. And what we've also observed is that multinational corporations have relied on single tenant applications are now facing rising compliance demands and business disruptive risks. And this is due to increasing nationalistic privacy and data protection and localization requirements, which inevitably perpetuates fragmentation of enterprise application architectures and data localization practices. So evidently, we can start to see that in order to break that fragmentation or to gel it better together, we need to start building ubiquitous interconnectivity. The third enabler in the standards world that will be crucial for us is to start establishing a robust digital verification and authentication to transition to a fully digital economy. This means enhancing security, streamlining transactions, reducing cost. And this practice of verification and authentication is foundational to AI assurance infrastructure and detecting errors in risk and liability across IoT and e-commerce chain. Finally, we need to think about how can we change the way we convene in order to bring non-standards converts on board and create value for the market. How do we drive international alignment in critical emerging technologies? As you can see today, there's so much going on across the different standard setting organizations and also in terms of bilateral cooperations. So we need to think about how we're still creating that coherent structure of standards supporting implementation and supporting industry programs. And finally, how can ICT facilitate our progress towards accessibility and sustainability goals? Right. And this brings me to the next slide. Basically, I've tried to map some of the supporting initiatives we have within BSI to answer these key enablers, and it will help us steer our work along the way as we progress. So for evolving cybersecurity controls, we try to address that, make sure that we're keeping up to speed with what's going on in the industry, and for mature tech and those types of techs that have a critical impact on safety, quality, and compatibility, we try to address that through our core standards committees, that the 13,000 experts that I mentioned that are doing the work already in our international committees. And we're also trying to do more promotion and outreach to raise awareness of how there may already be existing standards that can help address or be revised to respond to these future trends and threats. And secondly, for ubiquitous interconnectivity, we need to start thinking about how we can extend the use of standards across sectoral applications. So this means that we're already doing this through communities of interest and practice. So starting to look outside the box of just participating only in standards committees work, the ones that are work items that are influenced by ISO and IEC, we start to think about how can we help to connect the dots between different types of work that's going on, and also start to reach out to other types of stakeholders who may not be familiar with standards. So reaching out to them through a community of practice, and also with industry programs, which I will share more about later, that we work with the UK government on. And also with interconnectivity, I think it's also crucial that we start coordinating horizontal standards that cuts across different application sectors and start to break down the specificity of topics. So we're trying to do this through a coordination arm within our standardization program, where we start to pick out what are the common themes and threads going on across different digital committees, surface that up to for further discussion to provide a more UK or at least a coordinated response to those common themes. And in terms of verification and authentication, we are starting to also look through our flagship standards in cybersecurity and software resilience, make sure that we are articulating how that addresses the present day needs and also future challenges. And in terms of trying to answer that question on developing a whole of NQI, National Quality Infrastructure Solution, it's not just about us driving the management of the core standardization activities. It's also looking at how we can make sure governance is upkept at the Joint Technical Committee 1 for ICT, Information Communication Technology, but it's also about building like a global alliance network with different NSBs or with different bodies that are looking at standards, providing standards-based solutions. And finally, I think apart from developing standards, we also need to think about how we can help the users build their implementation capability. So whether this be through training resources and also more industry consultation workshops. And this brings me to my next slide here, where I share a bit more about what I've alluded to in the previous slide, the core work here around promotion and outreach, convening. So in the convening bullet point, we've started a community of practice on data standards. I will share more about that later. And in terms of the core strategic work, we've started to relook the structure of our standards program. And in terms of new work, we're also going in to convene in new and novel ways. So quantum technology is now becoming the next wave of technological innovation. And we have successfully secured the new Joint Technical Committee 3's secretariat position for quantum technologies. But what does this mean for us? Like, how do we helm and steer the international group in an agile and effective way to develop the new proposals that come through JTC3? And also, how do we continue to corral the right expertise in quantum technology? And lastly, in terms of new work, it's also about, as I've mentioned earlier, when we start to think about how we future-proof our NSB work, we need to think how we need to make standards smarter. So driving digital transformation through smart standards pilots. And of course, in addition to these work streams, there will always be perennial issues that we'll continue to look at. We need to better engage SMEs in the standards development process. And we also need to start building impactful collaborations with the UK government to support international regulations in digital with the help of standards. And the outcome of this is to amplify our value and credibility across the digital domains, build up our relevance in the digital space and across sectors, and also encourage effective coordination and collaboration across different digital standards communities within the UK and globally. And so this brings me to my next slide. Our standardization program, as I've mentioned earlier, is driven by consensus. So we engage a diverse and inclusive group of stakeholders, but at the same time, we need to make sure that the standards work itself is informed by what's going on in the industry. So we do that by harnessing internal and external insights through these two entities on the top layer that you see here, our SPSC and our Digital Strategic Advisory Group. And one layer down from that is trying to see how we can apart from participating actively in all the international work that's going on, we need to further distill that into what it means for the UK. Are there any specific standards-based solutions that we want to develop out of the trends that we're seeing internationally? And we try to do that through our optimization committee. And finally, on the third layer, you see the core standards development layer. That's our committees from digital first and second committees. I'll come to that later. And on the final level, it's trying to go beyond our traditional standards development experts. How do we enthuse and bring in a next wave of standards experts? So we're trying to do that through communities of practice, and we've already launched a data standards hub that supports the National Data Strategy Mission 1, which is unlocking commercial opportunities for the UK economy. I'll share more about that in the slides to come. So this is just to give you a flavor of which are the committees that my team looks after. Digital first just means that they're traditionally very close to the digital space in digital and digital manufacturing, and digital first committees are here, and digital second committees are the other supporting areas to digital. So they could be biometrics, it could be healthcare, it could be robotics. So we also try to include them in the national work that we do to ensure we've got a coherent work plan and connecting the dots across all digitally affected sectors. So in terms of trying to address technological advancement, as I've mentioned, we've clinched the secretariat role for JTC3, and we're working closely with members to try and get the business case out and try to scope out what the next 3 to 5 years is going to look like as we embark on our standards development journey in the quantum space. And I think it's also important to recognize that things are changing. We're moving increasingly towards an AI and quantum-enabled future. So what this means is that we can't look at tech in isolation anymore. We need to start connecting the dots, especially between like data-driven processes and sectors like IoT, AI, robotics, and any type of technology or application that involves a lot of data-driven decision making. And we're trying to also see how can we better measure the value of standards and find some impact indicators for that. And I've mentioned earlier, it's all well-meaning to engage the industry, but we also need to give more visibility and voice to consumers. So increasingly, we're working closely with our CPIN colleagues to get consumers more involved in standardization topics such as privacy by design, AI, and also AI at the European level and in the international level. So this, I'm conscious of the time, so I'll try to speed up along. Okay. So in coming to the second key enabler, I mentioned about ubiquitous interconnectivity. These are the different pockets of work streams that's happening in the digital committee space. Within AI, our international committee for that is JTC1 SC42. It has a growing portfolio of more than 72 standards. And we're continuously trying to prime the market, especially with the recent publication of 42001, which is the AI management system standard. We're still trying to prime the market and prepare it for the imminent publication of 42006, which is the certification requirements to the AI management system. And in the next few years, the 42005, which is on impact assessment. And I think it's also worth mentioning that as much as we are pushing the work along at the international level, we also need to keep an eye on the standardization requests that are coming through the EU AI Act. So we're also working closely with our EU counterparts to make sure we get the work for that going on in good time. And of course, with cybersecurity, we are very our well-loved 27000 series. It's also about making sure that continues to address new trends in the cybersecurity space. And also, increasingly, we're seeing that privacy and identity is becoming a focus for the IST 33 or SC 27 committees. And also, we're starting to see cybersecurity in AI popping up in the cybersecurity work items portfolio. So these are some new trends that are happening in this space. And with data, we're trying to work with the community of practice to develop intersector guidance on data sharing. And we've done that through a community of practice hub, where we've conducted a gap analysis and mapping of existing standards across the existing portfolio, and mapped that with the data standards framework that we've developed last year with our data panel. And so we're trying to ensure that we are monitoring, not just monitoring the proliferation of standards, but making sure that there's proper uptake and it is indeed answering questions that the industry needs answered. So, and then I've covered quantum earlier. And in terms of connectivity, I think it's also important to note that we need to pay more attention to cyber physical infrastructure, because the relevant domains like digital twin, robotics, AVs, and smart manufacturing will still continue to intertwine. And we need a coordinated work program through our optimization committee. And finally, we're also looking at possibly forming an advisory group to address questions on 5G networks. So in terms of communities of practice, trying to go beyond just the conventional standards committee model that we've been used to at BSI, this is a new direction that we're headed towards in terms of building that whole of NQI solution. Increasingly, we're starting to get more involved with other partners, with the government and with other standard supporting partners. So we have, for instance, launched the AI Standards Hub, which is a three-way partnership between BSI, the Alan Turing Institute, and NPL, and it's supported by the Office for AI and DCIT. And I think in this hub, we have anchored the 4 pillars of activities for it. So we have an observatory, which includes interactive database for AI standards and provides you with timely updates and notifications when something changes. We've also started to create a forum for collaboration and learning with e-learning modules and also in-person training during those webinars. And finally, we also work with partners to develop research papers. And the wonderful thing about this is that all these things are actually free to participate in. And so that's for the AI Standards Hub. And recently, we've also worked with Innovate UK. There's the Bridge AI program. It's a joint delivery project we have with them to connect SMEs in priority areas with AI experts to develop trusted AI services and technology. And so that's for the AI communities of practice. I've mentioned lightly on the Data Standards Hub, and this hub has actually produced a value of data report that basically sets out what are the 7 characteristics of good quality data that every organization should look at throughout the data lifecycle. And riding on the back of that report, we have then started to convene the hub in more interactive activities to share data sharing best practices, and also started to do more sector consultation workshops. And finally, in terms of keeping this NQI solution in check, we also make sure that we involve our committee experts in areas on governance around how we participate in the Joint Technical Committee on ICT, making sure that the system is still robust and we are reinventing ourselves when needed. So for those who are interested in the Digital Standards Committee's work, I'd like to signpost you to some of these committees that are very active. So if you're based in the UK and you're interested in cybersecurity itself in BSI looks after quite a number of different areas like the Information Security Management System, cryptography, identity management, and biometrics and privacy, which is where the H assurance standard work is folded under. So this would be the committee to participate in if you're interested in getting more experience and just really having a go, rolling up your sleeves and working on developing standards with us. And the other high activity committee would be ART1, which is our National Standards Committee on AI. They're currently looking at a plethora of topics, as you can see on the far left of my slides. They're addressing things like risk management, computational approaches and bias, and more recently on how do we ensure good quality AI data. So these are the hot topics that they're looking at within ART1. And this brings me to my penultimate slide, just giving you an outlook for 2024. These are the standards that we are expecting throughout the year. Of course, these are indicative dates, but it's just something to be mindful of if you're interested in keeping track of what's coming up. And this brings me to my final slide. If you'd like to get involved, please join us. You can sign up to be a standards maker through this link, and you can join the communities of practice that I've mentioned earlier. And if you're still on the fence about it, there's really a lot of resources that you can find on BSI's website to get acquainted with what standards is and the value and benefits of standards. So with that, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.